Are you always this generous to strangers, or am I just lucky? The woman's voice was low and musical, reverberating in the cramped corridor with an otherworldly resonance that made every hair on Talon's neck stand on end. He found her standing near the maintenance hatch of his small starhopper, drenched from head to toe in a translucent, glowing liquid that seemed to bead along her skin before dripping onto the metal floor. Tiny rivulets of phosphorescence trickled down her neck, illuminating the faint ridges above her collarbone. He didn't know what had happened or how she had gotten there. All he knew was that she had appeared out of nowhere, trembling under emergency lights that cast everything in flickering half-shadows. Without thinking, he had thrust a towel at her. As soon as her slender fingers closed around the fabric, she pulled it around her shoulders and made a declaration he could not have anticipated. "I'm yours now." Her strange eyes bored into his, bright lavender with vertical pupils, like a cat's. He was used to dealing with oddities in the far reaches of the galaxy, but this was something else entirely. The closeness of her body, the subtle shimmer of her skin, the near-hypnotic cadence of her voice, it all overwhelmed him, stirring a hot coil of tension in his gut. He tried to play it off with sarcasm. "Right. That's definitely how it works. You show up unannounced on my ship, ruin my best towel, and now you're my responsibility? Must have missed that part of the standard flight regulations." She narrowed her eyes, pursing lips a shade of pale violet. "Your flight regulations aren't the only ones that matter. On my world, an exchange of cloth is a sign of acceptance, a bond. Especially in moments of vulnerability." She drew the towel tighter around herself, luminous droplets still rolling off her skin. "I was vulnerable. You sheltered me. So yes, you're mine as well." Talon tried to control a nervous laugh as he stepped around the corridor's narrow bend, flicking a switch to power down the overhead lights that buzzed annoyingly. The starhopper was only meant for short hauls, not for hosting alien visitors, let alone ones who glowed. "Look," he said, casting a sidelong glance at her. "It's been a long run. I picked up a distress call near the abandoned fueling station on Dashin Ridge. Maybe that was you. Next thing I knew, all my sensors went haywire, and I found you here, dripping phosphorescent goo all over my hydraulic lines. Why don't you just tell me who you are?" She blinked slowly, as if tasting every syllable before letting them pass her lips. "My name is Rissa. I escaped a holding pen that was set up inside the fueling station. They take my people. Trade them in far-flung colonies." She swallowed, eyes flitting toward the deck, a haunted flicker crossing her face. "I ran, but the life pod malfunctioned. I didn't know if I would survive until I saw your vessel. The rest is fuzzy." He could see the tremor in her shoulders, how fear warred with relief across her delicate features. He wanted to comfort her but wasn't sure how. "Talon," he said, awkwardly extending a hand before thinking better of it. She looked at his outstretched palm questioningly, so he pulled it back and folded his arms. "Anyway, that's my name. I'm a freelance pilot, smuggler, if I'm being honest, and I had business out here. Wound up next to an abandoned fueling depot crawling with trouble, it seems." He paused, glancing at the towel. "Why the glow?" A wry smile ghosted across her lips. "It's a defensive secretion. Helps my kind see in the dark, among other things. Some call it an adaptation to the subterranean rivers on my home world. I was startled when the atmosphere changed. My body responded." Her gaze lingered on him, as if measuring whether or not he could handle the truth. "I can tone it down if it bothers you." No, it's fine," Talon said, realizing he was gawking. He could not deny a certain captivation, the ethereal shimmer, the lilac glow of her flesh, the flickering reflection along the corridor's dull steel. She was intriguing, mysterious, and so obviously out of place in his cramped ship, which smelled of engine grease and stale coffee. "Just maybe don't get it on the console. Hard to clean." His feigned calm masked something else throbbing beneath his ribs, an acute awareness that she was undeniably beautiful in an alien, sharp-edged way, and that he was dangerously close to letting his guard slip. He tried to focus on the immediate problem. "If there are slavers around, we need to get the hell out of here." She nodded, eyes drifting around the ship as she nestled further into the towel's warmth. They came after my people once the resource war started. We have a substance in our bodies, my glow, specifically, that's very valuable on the black market. It can be harnessed as an energy source. Some think it has medicinal uses. Whatever the reason, we've been hunted for it. My escape was pure luck. A pang of sympathy coursed through Talon. He'd heard rumors about this kind of trafficking but never imagined he'd meet someone involved. He gestured for her to follow him to the cockpit, ignoring how she trailed him with silent steps, her expression shifting between apprehension and determined curiosity. The cockpit was small, 2 battered seats, a flickering holodisplay that read, "Autopilot engaged," and a wide view of the swirling cosmic darkness outside. He slid into the pilot's chair, fired up the thrusters, and charted a course away from the Dashin fueling station. Rissa stood behind him, close enough that he could feel the faint warmth radiating off her. He swallowed, the tension building in his chest, fighting the urge to look back. Instead, he kept his hands steady on the controls. "We'll head out to a safer quadrant," he said. "I know a station that's more or less neutral. You can get medical care if you need it, and I can find out what in the galaxy is going on. Maybe stash you somewhere safe." A hint of challenge glinted in her eyes when he turned to meet her gaze. "I appreciate the rescue, but I'm not looking to be stashed away, Talon. We may have different traditions, but I'm not your helpless baggage. You gave me a towel, which means you accepted me, at least in my culture. But I won't weigh you down with my trouble if you don't want it." Her calm self-possession was startling. It wasn't the wide-eyed gratitude or timid subservience he might have expected from someone in her predicament. Instead, she stood tall, defiant even, as though daring him to underestimate her. He found himself admiring that. "All right, guess we'll just have to figure out what comes next," he said. "For now, strap in. We're jumping to light speed as soon as the NAV system finishes calibrating." Rissa took the co-pilot's seat, hugging the towel around her. As soon as she settled in, a subtle shift happened. The overhead lights flickered, and Talon felt a surge of energy. For a moment he thought it was a glitch, but then he realized her skin flared slightly brighter as the engines roared. "Are you doing that?" he asked, eyebrows shooting up. "The glow. It's reacting again." She ran her tongue along her lower lip. "It's an involuntary biological response. My body can sense gravitational shifts, warp jumps, electromagnetic fields. The more intense the shift, the stronger the glow. It's almost like an extension of my senses." "Handy," Talon murmured, keying in final instructions. "Just don't light up so much that we become a beacon out here." He flashed her a quick grin, relieved when she returned it with a crooked smile of her own. Then he reached forward, grabbed the hyperdrive lever, and yanked it. The starhopper bucked, a sensation like being turned inside out coursing through them, and the swirling stars outside stretched into shimmering lines. They were in hyperspace. He tried to ignore how the subtle illumination from Rissa's body made the cockpit's darkness more intimate, as if they were sharing a secret. A tingle ran down his spine. "So, what is your plan?" she asked, her voice cutting through the hum of the engines. He shrugged. "We survive. That's the immediate plan. Then we see if we can help you reunite with your people or get you somewhere the slavers can't find you. Meanwhile, I'd like to not get blasted out of the sky by whoever's running that operation at the fueling station." Rissa nodded, her gaze skittering to the star map. "I saw them prepare cargo haulers. They're probably taking more of my kin to the outer systems. If you could stop them." Talon inhaled sharply, wincing at the weight of her request. "I'm one man, Rissa. One pilot in a small, beat-up starhopper. I'm not a hero. I run cargo, make deals, occasionally smuggle things I shouldn't. This is bigger than me." She stared at him, unblinking. "Sometimes, all it takes is one spark. Maybe you're that spark. You pulled me out. You didn't have to. Maybe I'm just an idiot with a sense of guilt," he said, trying to deflect, but her gaze pinned him in place. He found himself looking away, uneasy under her searching stare. After a moment, he cleared his throat. Anyway, let's get you something else to wear. That towel's not exactly standard attire. Follow me, my bunk's not far. The corridor was tight enough that when he rose, she nearly brushed against him, the warmth of her body ghosting along his arm. He tried not to let it rattle him. He'd known plenty of women, human and otherwise, throughout his travels, but none whose presence sparked this deep, humming tension in the air. He could smell something subtle on her skin, not quite floral, not quite mineral, but definitely alien. He led her past the cramped galley, where a single overhead light flickered. In the bunk area, he rummaged through a storage locker until he found a spare set of clothes, simple cargo pants and a shirt, both too big for her slender frame, but at least they'd be better than a towel. He turned to hand the clothes to her, only to find she was standing so close that the breath caught in his throat. She was studying him with that same intense focus, her glowing eyes flickering with curiosity, or maybe something else. "This will have to do," he said softly, pushing the bundle into her arms. She parted her lips, about to say something, but only nodded. Without warning, she reached up, brushed the back of her hand across his cheek. He almost flinched, not expecting the intimate gesture. Her touch was cooler than he expected, though it left a tingling spark in its wake. "Thank you," she said. "For everything." His pulse kicked up a notch. He forced a half-laugh, stepping back. "Yeah. Sure. I'll let you change." He ducked back into the corridor, letting out a slow breath. Already, this day was shaping up to be the strangest of his life. While she dressed, he busied himself checking the ship's sensors. The Starhopper was running smoothly, but he felt a creeping sense of unease. Rissa's mention of slavers wasn't something to brush off. He'd once run a small job for a shady group known as the Sijak Cartel, rumored to dabble in all sorts of illicit enterprises, including organ trafficking and dealing with captured aliens. If they were involved, things could get ugly. The soft rustle of fabric drew his attention. Rissa emerged from the bunk area wearing his shirt and pants, the sleeves and legs rolled up multiple times to fit her slender frame. She was still barefoot, and her hair, dark, with shimmering strands of silver, fell around her shoulders in damp waves. He noticed she held the towel folded in her arms as though it were some holy relic. Something in his chest ached at her reverent treatment of something so mundane, like he was glimpsing a deeper layer of her culture that he couldn't fully comprehend. "All set?" he asked, trying to keep his tone casual. She nodded. "The clothes are soft. They smell like you." Heat rose in his face. "Sorry. Didn't have time to launder them." Her lips quirked. "It's comforting, actually. So where to now?" That was the big question. He stared at the star map flickering on the console overhead. One possible place came to mind, a drifting station called Sorovek Outpost, known for being neutral territory. It was a sort of last-chance fueling station that served smugglers, runaways, and everything in between. "We'll head to Sorovek Outpost. Not the friendliest place, but it's better than nothing, and it's far enough from the fueling depot that we might shake whoever's following you." Rissa didn't argue, though a subtle worry lingered on her face. "I just hope the others are safe," she murmured. He exhaled heavily. He didn't want to offer false hope, but neither could he crush that spark in her eyes. "Let's get ourselves in one piece first. Then we'll figure out our next move." He guided her back to the cockpit, watching how carefully she moved, how she tried to keep from brushing against the walls. She seemed to have an innate sense of every inch of the space around her, like she was used to narrower passages or maybe subterranean caverns. She settled in the co-pilot's seat again, and he resumed control. Through the shimmering swirl of hyperspace, he felt her quiet presence. They might have been near strangers, but something about the past hour had forged a delicate connection. He couldn't help replaying her earlier words in his mind. "I'm yours now." Whether that was custom or superstition, it gave him a strange jolt of responsibility, and maybe a flicker of intrigue that he was reluctant to name. The Starhopper emerged from hyperspace in a quiet region of space dotted with the faint glow of old stars. Off to the left, Sorovek Outpost drifted, an ungainly structure of metal spires and rotating rings. It had no official government sanction. It was run by a coalition of exiles who, over the decades, created a place where deals could be struck in secret. As soon as they dropped out of hyperspace, the comm crackled with the outpost signal, demanding identification and docking fees. Talon rolled his eyes. "Nothing's free around here," he muttered, keying in a payment code. He glanced at Rissa to gauge her reaction, but she was studying the outpost with a strange calm. "It's ugly," she noted softly. He chuckled. "Yeah, that's one word for it." The docking clamp engaged, and the ship shuddered. He quickly ran a systems check. "We're locked in. You ready for this?" She lifted her chin. "I don't want to hide in your ship, if that's what you're asking." "I figured. But keep your wits about you. This place is crawling with folks who'd sell their own mothers for a handful of credits. If we run into trouble, follow my lead." "You gave me a towel," she said simply, a half-smile curling her lips. "On my world, that means your lead is my lead." "Right." He found himself smiling back despite the tension in his gut. "Right," he said quietly, flipping the final switch that extended the boarding ramp. They stepped into the airlock. Rissa's bare feet made soft padding sounds against the metal. He paused, rummaging for an extra pair of worn boots, which she slipped on, lacing them with surprising deftness. "Ready," she said. The airlock hissed open, and they stepped into Sorvek outpost. The stench hit them first, a pungent cocktail of machine lubricant, stale sweat, and recycled air. The corridors were wide enough to accommodate cargo haulers, but the lighting was dim, flickering in places. Creatures from a dozen worlds jostled past, hissing, cawing, and whispering in languages Talon couldn't place. Holographic signs buzzed overhead, advertising everything from black market weapons to questionable medical enhancements. Rissa stayed close, her gaze dancing over every figure they passed. He realized she was taking in details: the shape of horns on a reptilian alien, the bristling ridges on a hunched mammalian figure, even the flickering neon advertisement that read, "Pleasure dens this way." Her glow was muted now, but still faintly visible if one looked closely. "Keep your head down," Talon murmured, guiding her by gently pressing a hand against her back. The contact made something in his chest tighten, an awareness that shot all the way down to his gut. She didn't flinch away. Instead, she let him usher her forward, trusting him in a way he wasn't entirely used to. They navigated winding passageways until they reached an old service elevator that took them to one of the outpost's upper levels. There, a series of private docking bays and a few barebones establishments could be found. Talon headed for a small bar named the Sundered Blade, run by a crusty old ex-mercenary named Wex. He'd known Wex for years, and while Wex wasn't exactly altruistic, he owed Talon a few favors. The bar's doors parted with a clang. Stale smoke hung in the air, tinted purple by overhead lights. A handful of patrons occupied the dark corners, nursing drinks that glowed ominously. Wex stood behind the counter, a battered cybernetic eye whirring as he cleaned a glass with a rag. "Talon, you worthless cheat," Wex drawled. "I'd almost convinced myself you found your end in a Sijak slaver pit." "Not yet," Talon answered, sliding onto a stool, with Rissa quietly hovering at his side. "Good to see you too, old man." Wex's gaze flicked to Rissa, interest piqued by her unusual appearance. Talon could practically see credits dancing in the man's mind. He tensed, not wanting to give Wex any ideas. "Who's this?" Wex asked. "Partner? Cargo? One-night fling?" Rissa stiffened, stepping forward. "I am not cargo." Her voice rang with quiet dignity that made Wex's eyebrows shoot up. All right. Didn't mean to offend, lady. Just not every day Talon waltzes in with company." Talon cleared his throat. "Look, Wex, I need information. Heard anything about slavers operating out near Dashin Fueling Station? Seems they're moving something valuable." "Might have." Wex's grin showed a row of stained teeth. "Information's got a price, you know that." Talon grit his teeth. He'd expected as much. "Yeah. I'll pay. Or I can do a job if it's worth it." Oh, it's worth it, Wex drawled, tapping the counter. What I know might change your life, boy. But I need a little insurance first. Insurance meaning? There's a cargo run to the frontier worlds. Nothing fancy, but it's contraband. You run it, I talk. You failed, you're out of luck. Talon-eyed Rissa, seeing the concern in her face. Did they have time for a side job, given the slaver threat? But he also knew that without leads, they were blind. Fine, he said, trying not to let his reluctance show. Give me the details. Wex nodded, pulling a data chip from under the counter. He slid it to Talon. Coordinates, cargo contents, client name, all in there. Now, about the slavers. Rumor has it that the Sijak cartel's behind the Dashin operation. They found themselves some fancy new prey, some glowing species from the outer rim, or so the whispers say. They're shipping him out for big bucks, maybe to private collectors or labs. You get on their bad side, you better watch your back. Rissa stiffened beside Talon, her gaze darkening. He placed a hand on her arm to steady her. Doesn't surprise me, Talon muttered. Where are they taking these people? Heard rumors of a place called Kraly's Outpost. A shadow port. Real hush-hush. If your friend's kin are alive, that's probably where they're headed. At the mention of Kraly's, a chill ran through Talon. That place was rumored to be a fortress of sin, hidden in the far reaches. Perfect for black market deals and horrors that no one wanted to see in the light of day. Thanks, he said, pocketing the data chip. When do I need to pick up this cargo run? Departures tomorrow morning, Bay 22C, Wex said. Bring your Starhopper, load up, keep quiet. That's all. Then come back to me with confirmation. Don't try to skip out. My people will find you if you do. Sure, Talon replied, not thrilled but with few options. He looked at Rissa. We'll figure this out. Let's go. They left the sundered blade, the weight of Wex's words hanging over them. Once they were outside in the corridor, Rissa spoke in a hushed tone. I can't ask you to risk yourself for my people. But I need to find them. Talon saw the anguish in her eyes, the desperation. He couldn't just abandon her. Something about her unwavering trust, and the guilt gnawing at his own conscience, compelled him forward. I don't like that Wex is making me jump through hoops, but if it gets us more intel, maybe it's worth it, he said. Once we finish this cargo run, we'll talk to him again. Then we'll see about Kraly's outpost. It won't be easy. People who go there don't always come back. I understand, she said, voice trembling with pent-up emotion. Then, without warning, she placed her palm over his, where it rested on his thigh. The corridor was too crowded for an intimate moment, but that single touch made the world narrow to just the two of them. The glow of her skin flowed along her wrist, a faint pulse that seemed to match the thrumming of his own heartbeat. Thank you, she murmured. I don't know how I can ever repay you. Don't worry about that right now, he answered, ignoring the tightness in his chest. Let's get off this station before someone realizes you're worth a fortune. They made their way back to the Starhopper, weaving through the throngs of shady characters and half-intelligible announcements. Once inside the relative safety of the ship, Talon sealed the hatch behind them and released a slow breath. Rissa lingered by the console, her face drawn. I hate this feeling, she whispered. Of being hunted, never safe. Talon's chest clenched. He stepped toward her, wrestling with the urge to wrap an arm around her shoulders. He settled for resting a hand near her elbow. We'll get through it. You're not alone. She turned slightly, pressing her cheek against his shoulder. When I said I'm yours, it wasn't just tradition, she said softly, her breath warm on his neck. We have bonding rights in my culture, yes, but there's also a feeling that I can't ignore. I know you sense it too. His heart pounded. She wasn't wrong. From the moment he first handed her that towel, an intangible energy crackled between them. It was more than just adrenaline or lust. It was a pull, a magnetism that defied logic. He swallowed hard, letting himself savor the closeness for just a moment. We don't know each other, he said, voice rough. But I won't deny that something's happening here. Let's just take it one step at a time. She nodded, her fingers curling gently around the hem of his shirt, as though anchoring herself. Then, with a shaky exhale, she pulled back and offered him a small, grateful smile. He tried not to linger on the loss of her warmth. Instead, he settled into the pilot's chair and motioned for her to take the co-pilot's seat once more. Let's get out of this place. We'll find a quiet spot to rest, then tomorrow we handle Wex's job. She nodded, and together they navigated the Starhopper away from Soravek outpost. As the engines roared to life, Talon couldn't help but glance over at Rissa, who was gazing at the stars with a mixture of trepidation and hope. The soft glow of her body illuminated the cockpit in a gentle, otherworldly luminescence, and a thought struck him: he'd never quite felt so protective of anyone before. The Starhopper slid into the void of space, leaving the outpost behind. Talon keyed in coordinates for a remote region where they could power down and remain undetected for the night. As the starry expanse enveloped them, he felt Rissa's eyes on him, a silent question lingering between them. He knew exactly what it was. Is there truly a safe place in this galaxy for someone like her? He didn't have that answer, but he was ready to fight for it. That would have to be enough for now. They flew in tense silence, the hum of the engines filling the cabin. After a while, Rissa stood and slipped quietly away to the bunk area. Talon stayed at the controls, checking and rechecking the sensors to ensure they weren't being followed. Only when he felt secure did he set the autopilot and head back to find her. The corridor was dim, illuminated mostly by her glow when he found her sitting on the edge of his bunk, knees drawn to her chest. "Can't sleep?" he asked. She lifted her face, that lilac gaze full of shadows. "Every time I close my eyes I see them. My people. I hear the slavers. The screams." A lump rose in his throat. He sat beside her, leaving a bit of space between them. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "No one should go through that." She stared at her hands, luminous trails tracing faint patterns on her skin. "Talon, do you really think we can save them? Or am I clinging to false hope?" He hesitated, not wanting to lie. "I don't know. But we can try." Her breath caught, and she turned to him, her vulnerability laid bare. Without a word, she reached out, slipped her hand over his. A jolt of electricity seemed to arc between them, and he found himself leaning toward her, drawn by a force beyond mere logic. It was like stepping off a ledge. He cupped her cheek, feeling the smooth warmth of her skin. She closed her eyes at his touch, a faint shiver running through her. "I don't want to feel alone tonight," she whispered, voice trembling. His heart pounded. He knew the line they were towing. But the intensity in her eyes, the raw need in her voice, struck a chord deep inside him. Slowly, he slid closer, until their breaths mingled. "You're not alone," he said softly. The moment hung between them, taut and quivering, then she leaned in, and their lips met in a gentle, searching kiss. His stomach flipped, an unsteady mixture of desire and empathy swirling in him. Rissa's mouth was cool, her breath tasting faintly of unearthly minerals, and yet it felt impossibly right. She released a soft sound against his lips, part relief, part longing. He lost himself in her for a moment, letting the world fall away. When they finally broke apart, she rested her forehead against his, exhaling shakily. "I know this is fast," she murmured. "My people, we feel things deeply. I can't help that." He stroked her cheek with his thumb, choosing honesty in return. "I'm not complaining. I feel it too. This pull. But I also don't want you to think you owe me anything. Your freedom, your safety, that comes first." She smiled, a tremulous, heartfelt expression that made his chest tighten. "Thank you, Talon, for seeing me as more than some rare resource to be used." The moment could have gone further. He could sense the flicker of heat between them, but a pang of responsibility reminded him that they were still in danger. With gentle regret, he pulled back. "We should rest. We'll need clear heads tomorrow." She nodded, though her eyes still shone with yearning, and maybe a bit of gratitude. "Stay here with me, at least until I fall asleep?" she asked, her voice vulnerable. He glanced around the cramped bunk, then sighed in resignation. All right. Move over. They slid onto the narrow mattress, half sitting, half lying, the metal wall cold against his back. She curled into him, her glow reduced to a soft pulse that lulled him into a sense of fragile peace. His arm wrapped around her shoulders, and he felt the steady rise and fall of her breath. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for now, this closeness, this mutual comfort, was enough to keep the ghosts at bay. Sleep came in fits and starts, punctuated by the Starhopper's soft whirs and the occasional beep of the console. Once or twice she stirred in his arms, shuddering with nightmares, and he whispered reassurances until she settled again. Only when he was sure she was deeply asleep did he finally let himself drift off. The next morning, though morning was relative in space, the alarm beeped, reminding him of Wex's job. He groaned, feeling stiff and disoriented. Rissa was pressed against him, her hair fanned across his chest. She shifted as the alarm continued. Their eyes met, and for a second, a shy smile crossed her lips, as though acknowledging the intimacy of the moment. Then reality set in, and Talon gently untangled himself to silence the alarm. "We have to go," he said. She nodded, rolling out of the bunk with surprising grace, her glow faint under the standard overhead lighting. They made quick work of preparing the ship, then slipped back into the swirling traffic around Sorovec outpost. This time, they headed for Bay 22C, as Wex had instructed. The bay was an industrial space filled with crates, loaders, and an assortment of unsavory figures checking off cargo lists. A tall, four-armed reptilian barked at them the moment they arrived. "Talon? Good. Your crate's over there. Don't ask questions about what's inside. Just get it to the coordinates on time, or you don't get paid." Talon nodded curtly, ignoring the coil of unease in his stomach. He and Rissa worked to secure the crate inside the Starhopper's cargo hold, the dull clang of metal echoing in the cramped space. Once the crate was locked down, they departed, slipping away from Sorovec outpost with minimal fuss. "This doesn't feel right," Rissa murmured once they were alone, her gaze flicking nervously to the cargo hold. Talon couldn't deny it. "We do the job, we get info. That's the deal. But I'm not a fan of ferrying unknown contraband." She bit her lip, tension etched across her features. "I just hope it doesn't risk more innocence." "Same," he admitted. "But we'll see it through. Then we'll demand Wex come through on his end." He plotted the course, and they jumped to hyperspace. The journey was relatively short, punctuated by a tension that neither of them could shake. Occasionally, Rissa's glow spiked when the ship's electromagnetic field shifted, but otherwise she remained lost in thought, likely worrying about her people and the shady cargo they were transporting. They arrived at a barren planet whose name Talon hadn't bothered to learn, orbiting it until they detected a small settlement. Touching down on the dusty surface, they were greeted by a group of silent figures wearing cloaks that concealed their faces. They exchanged a few curt words with Talon, confirmed the cargo's arrival, and loaded it onto hover sleds. Payment was transferred with a beep on Talon's handheld device, and that was it. No one asked questions. No one gave answers. It was over too quickly. As they lifted off from the dusty ground, Rissa let out a shaky breath. That felt ominous. "It's done," Talon said, though the pit in his stomach wouldn't go away. "Let's get back to Wex. Then we can push for answers." A tense silence settled between them, both of them grappling with the moral implications of what they'd just done. The Starhopper soared back into space, and Talon wasted no time setting a course for Sorovec outpost again. They arrived without incident. Docking in the same berth, they marched straight to the sundered blade. Wex was behind the counter, polishing glasses, wearing a smug grin as they approached. "So you delivered the goods?" "You know we did," Talon said, jaw tight. "Now hold up your end of the deal. I want everything you know about Kraly's outpost. Contacts, coordinates, security details, everything." Wex smirked, fishing out another data chip. "Wouldn't keep you waiting. Here's the skinny on Kraly's. It's a fortress, heavily guarded. Some say it's run by a warlord with ties to the Sijak cartel. If your friend wants to find her people, that's likely your best bet." But you'll need stealth and a lot of luck. Talon snatched the chip. Any code or pass we can use to get in without being blasted on sight? Don't push it, Wex growled. I've given you enough freebies for a lifetime. Good luck, kid. The old man's gaze flicked to Rissa, and for a moment, something like pity crossed his weathered features. Hope you know what you're getting into. Rissa stiffened, but Talon put a protective arm around her shoulders, steering her out of the bar before Wex could say more. Once they were in the corridor, he handed her the data chip. Let's get back to the ship and see what we're dealing with. She nodded, though her eyes were filled with trepidation. Talon, I appreciate what you've done. But you should know, I won't blame you if you decide to walk away. This is dangerous. Krayley's outpost is stop, he said gently, halting in the corridor and turning to face her. I'm not walking away. Not after everything. Not after. He paused, unsure if he should mention the kiss, the bond. But she understood, her eyes softening, her posture relaxing as she placed a hand over his heart. They lingered there, two unlikely allies united by more than just circumstance. Then, resolutely, they returned to the Starhopper. Once aboard, they locked the hatch and ran a full sensor sweep to be sure no one had followed them. Satisfied, Talon inserted the data chip into his console, scanning the intel. A 3D image of Krayley's outpost flickered into view, a sprawling station built into an asteroid field, ringed by automated turrets, and guarded by a fleet of heavily armed vessels. This is worse than I thought, he muttered, eyeing the formidable defenses. Infiltrating that place is a suicide run. Rissa studied it, her jaw set. I have to try. She reached out and tapped on the display, highlighting a cluster of tunnels in the asteroid. My people are rumored to live underground on our homeworld, so if they were captured, the slavers might store them in compartments that mimic that environment. Maybe here. She pointed to a dim sector near the outpost's underside, a labyrinth of cargo bays and maintenance shafts. That's a guess, Talon admitted, though he filed it away. We'll need to figure out how to slip past their defenses. I can help with that, Rissa said. My body can sense electromagnetic fields, right? If we get close enough, I might be able to identify weak points or alignments in their security net. Talon looked skeptical. You can do that from the ship? She shook her head. Not exactly. I'd have to be near or inside the station. His stomach twisted. So basically we have to go in blind, land, and hope we can sneak around while you sense their security. It's a risk, she acknowledged. But with no infiltration code, it might be our only chance. I can't let fear stop me. Her courage moved him. Despite the stark reality, he found himself nodding. All right, we plan carefully. If we can approach under cloak, or with minimal power signatures, maybe we can slip in through a less guarded sector. Once inside, we move fast. Find your people, get out. She gave a grim, determined nod. I owe you more than I can say. We're in this together, he reminded her, trying to keep his own anxiety at bay. He shut off the console, leaning back in his seat. We'll head out in a few hours. Need to gather supplies and maybe a cloak generator if we can find one. Then, we make our move. She stepped closer, the tension in her posture betraying her worries. On impulse, he reached out and gently squeezed her hand. We'll figure it out, he said. We have to. She tilted her head, her eyes brimming with emotion. You look tired, Talon. You barely slept. Yeah, well, big rescue missions do that. He tried for a wry smile, but it fell flat. She laced her fingers through his, warmth spreading from her touch. Before we do anything else, let's at least try to rest. You told me that last night. Now I'm telling you. With a reluctant nod, he let her pull him toward the bunk area. The tension that had been crackling around them softened, replaced by a quiet intimacy. They sat on the bunk, side by side, his arms slipping around her waist. For a moment either spoke, the weight of what lay ahead pressing down on them. Slowly, Rissa turned to face him, her expression pensive. In my culture, there's a bonding ritual for those who share a life debt. We mix our essence, My glow, your blood, and it signifies we're bound in trust. She hesitated, searching his eyes. I won't force that on you. But if we make it out of this alive, maybe I'll show you that ceremony. I want you to know who I really am. A lump rose in his throat. I'd be honored, he managed quietly. She brushed her thumb over his cheek, and the gesture sent a pang of tenderness through him. Then she leaned in, pressing a light kiss to his lips. He let himself sink into it, the swirl of tension momentarily replaced by soft warmth. She sighed against his mouth, and he gathered her closer, letting the moment stretch. Whatever complexities lay ahead, right now, they had each other. The prospect of sneaking into a heavily guarded outpost to liberate her people was terrifying, but so was the thought of losing whatever fragile bond they'd formed. Eventually they parted, breath mingling in the cramped air. She rested her forehead against his. I feel safer with you than I have in months, she whispered. Even though we're about to do something that might get us both killed. He inhaled deeply, inhaling her subtle alien scent, letting it ground him. Then let's make sure we don't die, he said, trying for a bit of levity. We've got more bonding rituals to check off the list, right? A soft laugh escaped her, and she nodded. Yes, we do. They rested for a short while, a half-doze that was more mental reprieve than real sleep. When the Starhopper's clock beeped, reminding them of the time, they roused themselves and prepared for departure. Talon parted with a chunk of his savings to acquire a rudimentary cloak generator from a shady vendor on Soravek. Then they fueled up, triple-checked the Starhopper's systems, and set a course for Kraly's outpost. The journey there was silent but intense, each of them bracing for what was to come. Rissa sat in the co-pilot's seat, carefully calibrating the cloak generator with an almost preternatural skill, no doubt guided by her sensitivity to energy fields. Talon handled the navigation, his jaw tight with focus. When the swirling streaks of hyperspace collapsed into normal space, the ominous asteroid field loomed before them. At its center was Kraly's, a dark shape studded with points of light and ringed by menacing defense satellites. Talon's heart thundered in his chest. This was it. He cut the main engines to minimum, letting the cloak generator engage. The Starhopper flickered, then vanished from standard sensors. At least, that was the plan. So far, so good, Rissa whispered, her glow intensifying as they neared the outpost's electromagnetic range. I feel the hum of their scanners. They're layered, but there might be a gap near that cluster of debris. She pointed out the window to a drifting field of broken asteroid shards. Talon guided the Starhopper closer, weaving through the floating rubble. The tension was unbearable. One wrong move, and Kraly's guns would reduce them to space dust. Finally, they approached a section of the station that looked less fortified, likely an old maintenance docking bay. The sensors flickered, indicating a possible landing zone. We'll have to land fast, then we move on foot, Talon murmured. Ready? Rissa breathed in, her glow pulsing. Yes. With painstaking care, he eased the Starhopper toward a neglected docking platform. The cloak generator whined under the strain, and for a terrifying moment, it almost cut out. But Rissa hastily recalibrated it, steadying the field. At last, the landing struts touched down with a hiss, the Starhopper hidden among twisted metal beams. Talon wasted no time shutting down the ship and bringing the cloak to a standby setting, hoping it would mask their presence enough to avoid detection. They grabbed weapons, Talon's blaster, a small blade for Rissa, and a few supplies. Then they stepped out into the stale, pressurized air of Kraly's outpost's forgotten corner. The corridors were dimly lit and smelled of dust and decay. Broken crates and rusted trolleys lay strewn about, evidence of a once active sector now abandoned. Stay close, Talon whispered, scanning every shadow. Rissa nodded, her eyes narrowed with concentration. Soft pulses of light ran along her forearms as she reached out with her senses. I can feel guard stations up ahead. We'll need to find a route that avoids heavy traffic. They pressed forward, guided by Rissa's instincts. More than once, they ducked behind crates or into side passages as patrols passed. The guards, heavily armed in dark uniforms bearing the Sijak emblem, moved in pairs, sometimes escorting chained figures who looked bruised and terrified. Rissa tensed every time they saw such captives, her face contorting with anger and grief. Talon squeezed her hand, silent reassurance that they were here to stop this. After what felt like an eternity of creeping through labyrinthine corridors, they reached a massive, sealed door with a security panel. Beyond it, faint sounds of movement and voices could be heard. "This is it," Rissa murmured, pressing her ear to the cool metal. "I sense so many. My people might be inside." Talon examined the panel. "Locked. High-level access needed. We'll have to force it." Before she could finish, footsteps echoed down the hall. Talon cursed under his breath and pulled Rissa behind a large crate. A pair of guards approached, scanning the door. One guard keyed in an access code, and the door hissed open. The moment they stepped through, Talon lunged. A quick strike to the back of the neck took out the first guard. The second guard whirled, but Rissa moved with startling agility, landing a blow that knocked him off balance. Talon clubbed him with the butt of his blaster, and he went limp. Heart pounding, Talon dragged their unconscious bodies out of sight, then motioned Rissa through the door before it shut. Inside, they found themselves on an elevated walkway overlooking a wide chamber filled with pens, cages, really, where dozens of aliens huddled. Some glowed faintly like Rissa, others had variations of color or physiology, but all wore expressions of despair. Rissa's eyes glistened with tears. "My people," she whispered. The walkway extended to a command station of sorts, manned by a few more guards. Talon gestured for Rissa to stay low as they crept forward. Using the element of surprise, they managed to neutralize the guards with precise shots. One guard tried to sound an alarm, but Rissa's quick reflexes saved them. She threw a blade that lodged in the control panel, shorting out the system. An alarm klaxon wailed for a split second before dying with a sputter of sparks. "Nice throw," Talon murmured, impressed. "Now we free them." He scanned the console, searching for the cage release mechanism. Meanwhile, Rissa hurried to the edge of the walkway, calling down to the captives in her language, a fluid series of clicks and musical intonations. Some recognized her and called back in wonder. Talon found a lever that controlled the electronic locks. With a groan of metal and a cascade of rattling, the cage doors swung open. A wave of frightened, disoriented aliens began spilling out, cautious yet desperate for freedom. Rissa descended the walkway steps to meet them, comforting them in quiet tones. Talon followed, scanning for any sign of reinforcements. The infiltration had been almost too easy, but he knew they weren't out of the woods. He was right. A side door burst open, and a squad of heavily armed slavers poured in. Their leader, a tall figure with patchwork cybernetic limbs, barked an order, and blaster fire erupted across the chamber. "Get down!" Talon shouted, returning fire. Pandemonium broke out as the newly freed captives scattered, some clinging to each other for protection. Rissa tried to shield them, her body blazing with intense light that cast an eerie glow across the chaos. Shots ricocheted off the metal walls, sparks flying. Talon ducked behind a console, wincing as a bolt seared past his shoulder. Rissa, moving faster than he thought possible, grabbed a dropped weapon from a fallen guard and unleashed a barrage of energy pulses toward the invaders. Her skill with a blaster was raw but fueled by determination. One by one, the slavers fell, but more kept coming, flooding in from adjoining corridors. Talon realized they couldn't hold out forever. "We have to get them out!" he yelled, gesturing at the terrified group of aliens. Rissa's eyes flicked to a large cargo lift across the chamber. "That might lead to a lower bay. If we can reach it, we might find a path back to our ship." Talon nodded, laying down suppressive fire as Rissa herded her people toward the lift. The deck was littered with bodies and debris. Smoke billowed from ruptured wires. Shots continued to echo, but the group managed to cram into the lift. Talon slammed the control button, and the doors clanged shut. Down they went, deeper into the station, the klaxon of alarms echoing through the shaft. His heart pounded. If they got trapped down here, it was game over. The lift jolted to a stop at a dimly lit corridor. Talon stepped out first, weapon raised, scanning for threats. It was quiet, too quiet. A scattering of overhead lights flickered, revealing thick cables along the walls. This part of the station felt older, half forgotten. Rissa ushered her people out, telling them in their language to stay low and stay close. Talon led the way, following a half-baked memory of the station's schematics from the data chip. If he recalled correctly, there was a maintenance hatch a few corridors over that might lead near the docking bay where they left their ship. The group hurried down the corridor, stifling coughs from the musty air. Now and then, they heard footsteps or distant shouts, but they managed to avoid any direct confrontation. Eventually, they reached a large circular hatch. Talon tried the control panel, but it was locked and encrypted. He cursed under his breath. "We'll never break this in time." Rissa's glow brightened with resolve. "Stand back." She placed both hands on the panel, her fingers splayed like she was trying to sense the electronics beneath. Talon watched in awe as she closed her eyes, her glow fluctuating in tandem with the faint hum in the corridor. Sparks danced around her fingertips, and the panel's lights flickered. With a groan of metal, the hatch hissed open. She stumbled slightly, exhausted by the effort, and Talon caught her. "You okay?" he asked, concern threading his voice. She nodded, panting. "Yes, just tired. Let's keep going." Inside the hatch was a cramped tunnel, barely wide enough for them to crawl through. Talon led, occasionally pointing out hazards or sharp metal edges. The group behind them moved in anxious silence, determined not to make a sound. He guessed there were at least 30 of Rissa's kin and possibly a few from allied species. Finally, they emerged into a narrow maintenance bay. Talon recognized a portion of the docking platform where they'd landed. "We're close," he whispered. "Come on." But the moment they turned a corner, half a dozen slavers blocked the way, weapons trained on them. Among them stood a tall figure with a shaved head and a sneer. "Going somewhere?" he spat. "You think you can waltz into my station and free the merchandise?" Talon's gut twisted. This was no random guard. This man had the bearing of a commander. "We're taking them," Talon said, voice steady despite the fears swirling in his gut. "And if you're smart, you'll stand aside." The commander let out a harsh laugh. "You've got spine, I'll give you that. But no one leaves Kralis unless I let them." Rissa stepped forward, eyes blazing with that haunting glow. "You'll let us," she hissed. "You and your kind are finished. We'll spread the word of your crimes across the galaxy." The man sneered. "I doubt it." He raised his blaster. In that instant, chaos erupted again. Talon dived behind a crate, returning fire. Rissa's kin scattered, some using their bioluminescence in a dazzling display that momentarily blinded the slavers. The corridor filled with streaks of energy bolts. One slaver rushed forward, brandishing an electro-whip, but Talon fired off a clean shot that sent him sprawling. Another lunged at Rissa, blade drawn, but she ducked and rammed the butt of her stolen weapon into his gut. The commander barked orders, trying to rally his men. One of the captives, a tall female alien with shimmering green markings, ripped a length of pipe from the wall and swung it with surprising strength, knocking a guard unconscious. Slowly, the tide turned in their favor. Talon, breathing hard, found himself face to face with the commander, who aimed a lethal shot at Rissa. Without hesitation, Talon threw himself in front of the beam, feeling the searing agony slice across his side. He cried out, staggering. The commander aimed again, but Rissa lashed out with an otherworldly shriek, her glow intensifying in a blinding flash. The man stumbled, disoriented, and she pressed her blaster to his chest and fired. He dropped with a final snarl, his eyes going wide before dimming forever. Gasping, Talon sank to one knee, clutching his burned side. Rissa rushed to him, panic in her eyes. "Talon!" "I'm all right," he managed, though the pain was excruciating. The rest of the slavers lay defeated. The path to the Starhopper was clear. "We have to go." She nodded, her voice breaking. "Lean on me." With her help, Talon pushed himself upright, ignoring the searing torment. They guided the group across the docking platform to where the Starhopper, still cloaked, lay hidden among the metal struts. Rissa keyed in the access code, and the ship's ramp descended. Chaos reigned as everyone scrambled aboard. Once inside, Rissa and a few of her kin carefully set Talon on a makeshift cot in the cargo hold. Others huddled nearby, terrified yet relieved. The doors sealed, and she ran to the cockpit, powering up the engines. The cloak generator sputtered to life. Talon bit back a groan as he tried to get up. Rissa rushed back to him, pushing him down gently. No. Stay still. I'll fly. But I said stay still, she insisted, her tone fierce, though tears shone in her eyes. I won't lose you now. With a grateful, pained nod, he relented. He could feel the ship vibrate beneath him as it lifted off the platform. Through the haze of pain, he heard Rissa's calm, clear instructions to the Starhopper's system. She guided them up, weaving around the station's defenses. Alarms blared, cannons firing blindly, but the cloak held. A few tense minutes later, the ship lurched into hyperspace, leaving Kralis behind. It was over. They had done it, or at least survived. Talon felt the tension draining from his body. His side throbbed, the blaster burned seeping blood. Rissa returned to him, rummaging through the medkit. Her eyes shone with concern as she pressed a cool, antiseptic pad to his wound. He hissed in pain. Sorry, she murmured, tears slipping down her cheeks despite her steeled expression. Don't be, he forced out, offering a weak grin. We made it. We saved them. A wave of relief seemed to wash over her as she bandaged him. Yes, she whispered. We did. The Starhopper's hold was cramped with nearly 40 rescued prisoners, but they were alive, clinging to one another for comfort. Rissa's glow comforted them all, a beacon in the dim cabin. Outside the small porthole, hyperspace swirled in ribbons of light, carrying them away from that nightmare. Hours passed as they tended to the wounded and tried to console the traumatized. Rissa's kin seemed to regard her with reverence, whispering her name and praising her courage. She, however, deflected it all, constantly checking on Talon, who grew weaker from the blood loss and shock. Finally, she sat beside him, cradling his hand in hers. We're safe, for now, she said softly. I've plotted a course to a neutral planet where we can hide, get medical care, and find a place for my people. He nodded slowly, forcing his eyes open. Good. He looked around at the huddled forms of her kin. They're free, thanks to you. She pressed her forehead to his, a silent gesture of profound emotion. And thanks to you. You risked your life, worth it. He mumbled, exhaustion pulling him under. I gave you a towel, after all. She let out a shaky laugh, tears wetting her lashes. Yes, she whispered. You gave me a towel. That means everything. Her arms slipped around him, and he let the tide of weariness drag him into darkness, trusting that, for once, he wasn't alone. The next few days passed in a blur of recovery, both emotional and physical. They landed on a remote planet known simply as Haven's Edge, rumored to have a small settlement of refugees and exiles. There, Talon's wound was treated by a compassionate medic who asked no questions about their origins. Rissa and her people found makeshift lodgings in a ramshackle cluster of shelters. Day by day, the bruises faded, the fear receded, and the stolen glances between Talon and Rissa grew longer, weighted with gratitude and a blossoming affection that neither could deny. When Talon was well enough to move around without doubling over in pain, he accompanied Rissa to a sunlit clearing outside the settlement. The sky above was a swirling tapestry of violet and pink clouds, and the air carried the scent of alien blossoms. She wanted to perform a small ceremony of thanks with her people, to honor their survival. Talon watched as they formed a circle, each individual's glow shifting in hue, creating a mesmerizing dance of light. Some glows were soft pink, others a pale green or deeper violet. They hummed, the resonance of their combined voices reverberating in the clearing. He felt a lump form in his throat. This was something beautiful, sacred, and he was lucky to witness it. After the ceremony, Rissa approached him, her cheeks glimmering. We want to thank you, she said softly. All of us. But especially me. He blushed, rubbing the back of his neck. "You don't have to thank me," he began, but she shook her head. "Talon, it goes beyond words. We owe you our lives. And I owe you my heart." His eyes widened, breath catching. "Rissa." She took his hands, guiding him closer. "I told you about my people's bonding. Normally, it's a ritual shared by two who vow to protect and care for each other. I know we haven't known each other long, but everything we've been through, my heart has already chosen you." His pulse raced, a flood of warmth washing over him. He cupped her cheek, marveling at how her glow intensified at his touch. He began, searching for the right words. She pressed a finger to his lips, smiling gently. "Only if you want it," she whispered. "No pressure." He laughed softly, pulling her closer. "I want you, Rissa. If this is the start of something bigger, I'm all in. Just tell me how." Her smile brightened. She led him deeper into the clearing, beckoning a few of her kin to join. They formed a small circle, chanting a low, harmonious melody. Rissa explained in hushed tones that to seal their bond, they would share a drop of each other's essence. He bared his forearm, letting her press a small, sterile blade to his skin. A tiny bead of blood welled up. In turn, her glow intensified at her fingertips, forming a luminous droplet that shimmered with violet iridescence. She mixed them together on a small, smooth stone. The group continued their soft chant, the air charged with reverence. Then, Rissa dipped her finger into the mixture and traced it along Talon's wrist. He felt a sharp tingle, not painful, more like an electric hum that sent goosebumps racing over his skin. He repeated the gesture, carefully pressing his bloodied fingertip to the ridge of her collarbone, where her glow was strongest. Their gazes locked, hearts pounding in unison. A wave of warmth coursed through him, and he sensed a shift, as though a door had opened between their souls. Rissa trembled, tears gathering in her eyes, not of sorrow but of overwhelming emotion. Their circle of watchers murmured a final verse, then fell silent. In that hush, Talon and Rissa stood together, bound in a way that transcended simple words. He couldn't explain it, but he felt her presence in every nerve, a gentle pulse of reassurance that they were in this together. She fell into his arms, and he wrapped her in a tight embrace, burying his face in her hair. "I'm yours," she whispered, echoing her words from the very beginning. "And you're mine," he returned, pressing his lips to her temple. The watchers discreetly dispersed, leaving them alone in the clearing. They sank to their knees in the soft grass, hearts hammering as they savored the intimacy of the moment. Rissa pulled him down beside her, leaning in to kiss him, deeply and fully, letting all the pent-up love and relief surge through that connection. Talon responded in kind, one hand tangling in her silken hair. The clearing was dappled with sunlight, the alien blossoms rustling around them, yet all he could focus on was the feel of her against him, the taste of her lips, and the quiet hum of belonging that blossomed in his chest. When they finally parted breathless, she gazed at him with shining eyes. "Where do we go from here?" He brushed a stray strand of hair from her face. "Wherever we want. We'll find a home for your people, a safe place. And if you want, we can keep traveling. I've still got that old Starhopper. Just needs a few repairs." A soft laugh escaped her. "My people will need guidance structure. But maybe we can find a place that welcomes us, or build one ourselves. And I would love to see more of the galaxy, with you by my side." He kissed her forehead, then her cheeks, then her lips again. "Count me in." The rest of the day was a blur of quiet jubilation among her kin, relief tempered by grief for those who hadn't made it out of captivity. Plans were made to contact other survivors, to spread word that they were free and rebuilding. Talon found himself drawn into the fold, not as an outsider, but as someone accepted, perhaps because of the bond he now shared with Rissa. Though not all of them understood the nuance of a human, and one of their own joining in such a way, they respected it. Days turned to weeks, and in that time, the battered Starhopper was patched up. Talon recovered fully from his wound, though it left a faint scar that Rissa would kiss sometimes, a reminder of the sacrifice he'd made. The settlement at Haven's Edge grew as more refugees arrived, hearing tales of a man who had freed them from Krayles with the help of one of their bravest daughters. The myth outstripped the truth, painting Talon as some gallant hero. He bristled at the attention, but Rissa teased him about it, proud of the difference he'd made. Their relationship deepened, each new day a discovery of culture, humor, and personal quirks. They bantered over the simplest tasks, her learning to cook some human dishes, him attempting to mimic the melodic phrases of her language. The awkward missteps often ended in laughter and stolen kisses. Sometimes, in the hush of night, they spoke of the horrors she'd endured, of the life she'd lost. He would hold her while she trembled, or she would cradle him when nightmares of the infiltration haunted him. Their slow burn of emotional closeness ignited quickly whenever they touched, the physical attraction charged by the trust they built. It was during one of those nights, under a star-flecked sky, that Rissa confessed the depth of her love. They were sitting on the steps of a half-finished shelter, the settlement quiet. She leaned her head on his shoulder, her glow mirroring the faint purple starlight above. "I never thought I'd find happiness again," she murmured. "Let alone with a human. But you showed me kindness I'd almost forgotten existed." Talon turned, brushing his fingers along her jaw. "I never thought I'd be more than a scrappy pilot, drifting aimlessly. Then you arrived, glowing and fierce, and everything changed." She smiled, eyes full of warmth. Their lips met, a tender promise of a future they had chosen. The tension that once haunted them had eased, replaced by a sense of possibility. Over the next few weeks, final preparations for a mass relocation began. Her people intended to take the Starhopper, along with other small ships donated by sympathetic smugglers, and find a new home world. Talon wanted to help them settle, to ensure their safety. And after that, who knew? He envisioned traveling with Rissa, forging a life of adventure, trade, and exploration, but anchored by love. The day they departed Haven's Edge was bittersweet. Locals they'd befriended offered tearful goodbyes. The Starhopper, now repaired and refitted with better shielding, and thoroughly scrubbed of the last remnants of neon goo, led a small convoy of vessels carrying Rissa's kin. Talon sat at the helm, Rissa beside him, her presence a calming flame at his side. As they broke atmosphere, the starfield stretched before them, infinite and inviting. Rissa reached for his hand, twining her fingers through his. "Ready?" He squeezed her hand gently, a grin tugging at his lips. "For anything." Their gaze lingered on each other, memories of frantic battles and desperate embraces dancing behind their eyes, forging an unbreakable bond. With a flick of a switch, the engines roared, and they soared deeper into the vast unknown. There, among the stars, they would build something new, both for her liberated people and for themselves. And every so often, Talon would remember the moment it all began, a simple towel, offered in kindness to a drenched alien woman who declared, in no uncertain terms, "I'm yours now." He would laugh about it, pulling her close, and she would glow with the joy that only true freedom and love could bring.